Any entrepreneur worth their salt has bumped heads with big corporates, and when big business wants to take on an SME, it is typically called corporate bullying. Joining us on the desk for more is Michael Judin from Goldman, Judin Attorneys. Thank you so much for your time, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
So is that the reality? The corporates out there are just the hardcore bulliers?
No, it's not the reality. There are instances where they are, but there are many instances where they are not, and all that they are doing, as they should be doing, is protecting their legitimate interests, their intellectual property, the results of their research, and it's not always bullying.
Of course, there is the complaint out there that as soon as an SME gets really good at what they're doing and they start infringing on the turf of a big corporate, then suddenly the claws come out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the intro is quite a snarky intro, in that often if you are an entrepreneur, you are going to try and cut corners. The whole concept of being an entrepreneur is to be a disruptor, essentially. And you know, everybody loves to be very structured in their environment, and of course, what does the entrepreneur do? He chucks all of that out the window and decides we're doing something a little bit different, and rules be damned. And I think, you know, that works for a period of time, and then you start to become too successful, and you start falling into the under the target of these big corporates. And I think you can see financial services in South Africa would be an example. Woolies Frankie's not exactly the same kind of example, but very often the response from corporates often seems to be overdone when and I think the expectation is that many SMEs will then just step back and say, oh, sorry, I've upset you, and then walk away. And I think you can play devil's advocate, and you can say, well, you know, there are plenty of stories in South Africa where small business has stood up to bigger corporate bullies, and they've won. And I think it's important that entrepreneurs know that, yeah, if they are doing something wrong, by all means they are going to be taken to the cleaners in it. But if you do genuinely believe you've got a case, then stand up for your rights.
Now let's talk about Woolies Frankie's and whether that is a feather in the caps of small guys out there. Obviously, we know Woolworths didn't handle it very well in terms of responding to media inquiries, but did the small guy win?
In that case, the small guy definitely won, but I would say it wasn't necessarily because the small guy had the better case. I would say because the big guy made a mistake. Woolies didn't respond immediately. They didn't communicate well when the accusations were made, and that gave Frankie's the opportunity to step in and turn public opinion against Woolies, which was very smart. But Woolies obviously had the deeper pockets, had more resources, and if they had been smarter about it, many have argued they could actually have won that case and kept stocking the brand.
Michael, I see that you want to give some legal input on the subject.
No,
look concerned.
No, not concerned. I just think that it's really very important that we see this in the correct perspective, particularly in South Africa, and the critical importance of SMMEs in South Africa's development. And I think it's very important that the ground rules are set for the big corporates and the small guys to live together, because many of those small guys are going to be the targets for the big guys to buy. Many of those small guys are going to sit on those big boards very shortly. And that's really where the focus should be. So I think it's very important for the big guys to respect the small guys and to treat them with the same regard and respect that they do the big guys. And why I say that is I think that the turf has changed dramatically, because I think we're in two eras. We're in two different eras. There was the era BSM, and that was before social media. And there's the era ASM, after social media. And
we like those acronyms.
And with my smartphone, I own the world. And you can have a brand that you've built for 50 years, and in nanoseconds, I can destroy that brand. So big corporates have to be very careful how they behave, because reference to all of their liability under the New Companies Act, their responsibilities under King 3, publicly traded companies under the Code for Responsible Investing. This is intangible but invaluable. The brand is what it's all about. I mean, Apple don't need an office. They just need the logo. And so you need to be very careful, because you trample on that small guy, give him a good social media consultant that doesn't come that expensive and a smartphone, and 50 years of brand reputation will be destroyed.
I think that puts it into context perfectly.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Willys Frankie's example, the actual court case was based on the a good old-fashioned tag phrase. And in fact, the court case ruled in favor of Frankie's on that basis. They didn't instruct Woolworths to remove the products from their shelves. Woolworths actually removed the products because of the backlash from social media platforms, where everyone was backing the David in this case.
And I think, you know, one of the good pieces of advice, and it's something that's been told to me a couple of times, is at the end of the day, if you're going to go head to head with a corporate, you're going to lose in the traditional battlefield. You just don't have the money. You don't have the coffers to take them on if you're a small guy. Let's be honest about that. And you end up crippling yourself. And one of the best pieces of advice is often to roll with the momentum. And instead of trying to dig your heels in and say, this is my view, that's your view, and we're not going to meet, never the two shall meet, often you have to roll with their momentum and let's say, all right, let's find a solution. And I think to the social media point is both brands can win and get a lot of the good positive feedback out of it. But small businesses cannot afford to be going head to head with the corporate for any amount of time. It's just the resources simply are not there. Yes, there are going to be times where you feel completely outraged at how you're being treated, but often trying to launch social media campaigns can also come back and bite you. I think what you're trying to do is find a win-win solution.
Moving beyond the branding and turf wars on that front, there's another issue, and we haven't got much time, so just very quickly to deal with that is whether small companies can in fact afford to do business with the big companies because of payment terms. Shouldn't there be separate rules of engagement when it comes to a small business supplying a large corporate in terms of, and now I'm just talking about payment, days of payment should be 30 days. And nothing more. You can't, as a small business, survive on 90 days. Is there going to be some relief on that front, Michael?
Absolutely. King 3 recognises the critical importance of the whole supply chain management, including the payment terms. And if you have a look at the principles in CRESA, where the big investors, or big shareholders, will be looking at how the companies in which they invest conduct business, with the environmental, social and governance principles, the ESG principles flowing from that. One of the things that they're going to absolutely insist upon is proper supply chain management, and the small guy being paid properly and promptly.
And timelessly.
And on a timely basis. Absolutely critical. Any responsible investor, shareholder, non-executive director would absolutely insist upon that in the company.
Well, we're nearly at the end of this week's show. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, to this payment issue, I mean, I think the government's made a very big effort to try and get SMEs paid consistently. I think it's one of the worst things to do is to actually do the work and not be paid for it. And I think if government's serious about it, so be it. But yeah, I think you can, with your corporate government, respecting each other is a big part of South African business at the moment. Respect the role that an entrepreneur plays, because they're the value creators at the end of the day. Value creators obviously create the value that the bigger corporates tend to thrive off.